we are going to talk about the maintenance of this system. And in regards to maintenance, we're going to talk about the filters here. So in the back here, just like the RODI single, we have a sediment filter and a chloramine filter. The sediment filter is the first stop, and typically you'll see this filter get visibly dirty as it's taking out all the sediments that you'll see hitting your system. Now, to change your sediment filter, you'll need your filter wrench included in your accessory bundle. The sediment filter looks as such. So you'll see this one had some water inside, but you'll see it creates a seal on the bottom and on the top of the filter. It does not matter what direction this filter goes in. There's no gasket to it or anything. It's a very simple filter. Now this filter locks in with the center nub of the bowl. So you just want to make sure you're getting it centered in there. And then you can simply hook up there we go. And then you can hook up the bowl to the cap and it's already set. Now, I do recommend anytime you're changing these filters, anything with a gasket, that is where your magic lube will come into play. This is where it would be important to lubricate the seal inside this pre-filter housing, which we'll take a look at in our next pre-filter. So the next stage of filtration is the chloramine filter, which, like I said, takes chloramines and other sorts of impurities out of the water. You typically see this in urban settings, in town water, anything that's treated, not so much in well water situations. So the chloramine filter has a gasket on both ends. Very common filter, looks just like a carbon filter. It's like a carbon filter on steroids, actually. And here you'll notice two seals. Those are seals that you can lubricate for a better seal, if you'd like. They come with a little bit of silicone on them, so it's okay to add more, but it's also okay to use as is. But if you notice any sort of strange TDS results out of your system, well, one thing we look at are seals. Another seal to note is around the threading here. If you look at the threads of the pre-filter bowl, you'll see a gasket. This is the same in this housing. This is an area where you can apply some of that silicone lube, the magic lube too, because again, that's going to help make a really good seal here. And if you notice any water coming out of here, and say you gave it a really nice tight squeeze on there, well, maybe it needs a little bit more lubrication for a better seal. These two filters are the filters that you're going to be changing most frequently, as they are the first stop in your system and the first line of defense for your RO membranes, which are the two filters in the stainless steel housings on the front. The frequency of a pre-filter change really depends on a couple factors. Depends on your usage, depends on how harsh your water is and what's in your water. Primarily, those two things will help you understand how frequently you're going to be changing these filters. For instance, you can run 5,000 gallons of high TDS and these have already prematurely failed, which means now they're allowing more stuff that shouldn't get in here to travel into the membranes. Or you're going to see a stoppage of flow because these have become so saturated with stuff and they've lost their efficiency that you may see a noticeable drop in flow. Now that is a great indicator, if you know you're using your system a lot, to change your pre-filters. Another indicator is as simple as a visual indicator. I've seen sediment filters that had 14 hours worth of use in Brooklyn, and they came out as brown as my boot. And it really depends on your source. You may run low TDS situations and get more out of your pre-filter. It's important to keep an eye on these two because these are protecting your most expensive filters. The more preventative maintenance that you take with your pre-filters, the more you're going to get out of your RO membranes. Which, on that subject, we're going to talk about the RO membranes. So these filters here are reverse osmosis filters. They're a filter that looks a lot like this. Now, this is just an example filter, but you'll notice one side has a seal and the other side does not. Here's your seal. It's a brine seal, as we call it. The brine seal here is going to stop any water from traveling past it, and it'll force water to enter through the sides of the membrane here. An RO membrane can remove up to 98-99% of solids, depending on your conditions, your source conditions. It really depends on your maintenance of your pre-filters. At their highest efficiency, you'll see about 98 to 99% of rejected solids be taken out of the water to travel through the wastewater. So your RO membranes inside these housings, you'll expect to change them at minimum a year's worth of usage, or longer if you keep up with your preventative maintenance, and obviously depending on how harsh your water is. But to get the most out of your membranes, make sure you keep up with your pre-filter changes and pay attention to how you store and use the unit, which we'll touch base on a little later. But when the day does come and it's time to change the membranes, the first thing you're going to want to do is to loosen up the clamps at the top of your RO housings. Now I've gone ahead and loosened these already. The size of the bolts and nuts are 14 millimeter or 9/16. You could also use a adjustable wrench with either mentioned size to be able to loosen this. So we're gonna go ahead, pop this off, and put it to the side. So now we're going to want to go ahead and remove the cap. Now, sometimes this can be easy. As you see, this is coming out with my fingers. You may find that it may be difficult to remove this cap. When in doubt, having a flathead and a mallet or something to tap it in, basically you can open it up like a paint can, and you want to aim between the lip of the metal and the plastic edge here. So again, once you expose it, you'll be able to get a flathead in and no problem. Occasionally the membrane will come out with the cap. This is not one of those times. So when you want to take out the membrane, it's also important to keep a pair of channel locks or pliers. So I'm going to show you inside here. So when it comes to the membrane itself, we're going to want to grab these spindles as opposed to the center. Grab the spindles, press your foot up against the edge of the frame, and then we're going to squeeze, twist, and pull. Then, when it's time to put the new membrane in, which we'll put this to the side, should stay nice. We'll take our next membrane, a replacement, I should say. So the replacement membrane, again, we mentioned the brine seal. It's important to take the lube and lubricate that brine seal. Go ahead and do that while we have it. That again is going to make sure that water is going where it's supposed to. Then you're going to put in your new membrane, give it a twist and a drop, and in it goes. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop the cap back on. Whoops. And you're going to press tightly all the way down until the cap meets the metal. So after you have the cap seated onto the housing, we're going to grab our clamps, and you're going to want to put the clamp between this portion of the black plastic and this portion of the metal lip. So again, you don't want to go here and call it a day. You don't want to go anywhere. No, you want to go grabbing both. And you know you're on there because you'll spin her around. It's nice and even. You don't feel like anything's caught. That's awesome. So go ahead and put the bolt back on. And then, of course, tighten your housing. You want to make sure that the clamps are tight and secure, and never open this cap when you're using the system. This is a pressurized housing. These membranes thrive over pressure. So, that being said, you don't want to open this up when there's pressure inside. And there we have it. New membrane is inside, which means it is time to saturate. If you changed your membrane, saturate it for 10 minutes, let it sit for 12 hours, and again, 500 gallons saved. The other thing I'm going to note for your RO housings is the waste valve at the bottom of the unit. Now, the waste valve is important because it's what we call a variable restriction. Now, you're going to see water come out here. I have it fully open. Now I have it closed. However, water will still travel because there's a small hole, a 1 1/16 size hole. That way you can still get a high pressure line out of there and it won't close off the circuit, which would cause your membranes to choke and break. So we don't want that. Now the importance of this valve, again, is so you can flush your RO membranes. Now why would we do that? Why would we flush RO membranes? Well, because for prolonged periods of usage, sitting, anything, all of the stuff that's beyond that brine seal we just spoke about can scale and sit on the edge of the membrane, which can cause problems, cause the membrane to foul, basically, and not efficiently perform. So to help combat that, you can open up your valve entirely so there's no restriction. Remove this hose because a lot of water is going to travel through. You do not want this line to spin around like a fishtail. And if you run water for 5 minutes, that's going to help flush out all that stuff that's just going to build up on your membranes. Now, if you're in low TDS situations, you can get away with flushing maybe once a week. If you're in a higher TDS area and you're doing a lot of jobs, maybe you're doing it between jobs. Maybe it's 2 to 3 minutes at the end of the job. Maybe it's 5 minutes at the end of the day. Either way, this system is equipped with ways to help make your membranes thrive for longer. So flushing is important if you want to get more out of your membranes and keep it clean. It's like keeping your car clean. So for now, we're going to close that valve, and we're going to focus our attention on the final stage of purification. The final stage of purification is the DI resin chamber. So the DI resin here is loaded into a 10-inch cartridge. The cartridge is seated in this housing. When it's time to change, again, behind the unit, take your wrench, have it angled to the right, and pull towards you. Give it a couple spins, 3 spins, and then you'll know on the 4th spin, it's going to come dislodged. That way, there's no surprises when this comes out. Here is the DI cartridge equipped with a spacer to help secure it in place. This is equipped with DI resin. You'll see inside here. This cartridge is something you'll want to change once your system starts reading 10 ppm or 10 parts per million out of the unit, meaning it's time to change your resin. Which you could either purchase a cartridge that is pre-filled with resin, and that'll be nice and easy, or you can dump out the resin, rinse out the cartridge, and if you have quarter cubes of resin yourself, you can fill it, pack it in real tight, and you want to get to the threaded portion of this housing. By that point, you know you have a lot of resin that's going to get tightly packed and not create any channeling. Channeling is just like if you ever played with sand and you have a concentrated bulk amount of sand that splits and you have almost like a little canyon. That's kind of like what's going on in channeling of resin. It's like a vein that opens up. It means there's not enough resin in there, that's for sure, or just a lot of it clumped together. So a way to combat that is take out your cartridge, give it a couple taps on the ground, and then we can reinstall it into the housing. I should also note, direction does matter on a cartridge like this. There's only one seal. You'll see the bottom and the top are different, and you'll notice an impression on any cartridge that has been inside a housing. So when you know that's nice and centered, you know you have a good seal, you're gonna get good pure water. This is one of those gaskets that it never hurts to take a little magic lube and lubricate your seal. So now we can drop this back in. Just like the pre-filters, you'll notice on the center of the bowl, there's a little nub for this to sit on. Once you know that's pushed in and seated nice, then we can go ahead and reattach, it to the system. And it's as simple as that. And then from there, you'll be able to run pure water to your pole without any issue. So as long as you keep up with the nature of all your filtration and the frequency, and obviously knowing what kind of water you're dealing with, you'll get the most out of your PWP Dual RO DI system. Now that we've already spoken about the maintenance of your unit, we're going to touch upon proper storage and care for the unit so you can get the most out of it for multiple winters. So when it comes to wintertime, RO membranes do not like the cold. In fact, they do not like freezing conditions. And that is because while something operates under high pressure, if you imagine the concept of wood in heat, it's going to expand. Wood in cold, it's going to be constricted. In a pressurized situation with no escape, any change in temperature going from freezing to non-freezing, anything rapid, especially water traveling through, is going to cause pressure to want to go from high to low, just like wind, just like weather. So when it comes to using this in wintertime, it's not really a good idea. In fact, if it's freezing outside, you will damage your RO membranes. They can crack, they can expand, same thing with the plastic housings. So wintertime is not the best time to use it if it's going to be cold, so what do? Well, that's where the RO Guardian comes into play. So RO Guardian, again, has a QR code so you can scan to learn more about it. But what you're going to do with this, say it's wintertime, you're going to take this and a gallon of RV antifreeze, and then you can go ahead and disconnect your DI hoses. Now remember, your DI hoses are hooked up over here. I would disconnect those because we don't want any of this to travel into here. And then you would remove your RO caps just like you would during a filter change. You'll take off your clamps with either the 14mm or 9/16 size wrench, and then you'll pop off the RO cap. And then with your mixture of this plus antifreeze, you'll be able to pour it in slowly through the sides. By doing so, you're basically pickling your membrane. Pickling your RO membranes will allow it to sit in your garage with no problem. You don't have to worry about any microbial growth, and you don't have to worry about your membrane suddenly becoming cracked. Now say it's not winter time and you want to take a vacation for 2 months, or you can't work for a couple months and you're not going to be able to use your unit. Well, the longer the unit sits, the more bad things happen, such as microbial growth. Microbial growth is the buildup of microorganisms and bacteria from stagnant sitting water. And inside a closed housing like this, it's like a breeding ground for them. So RO Guardian, that membrane preservative, can also be used for periods of long-term sitting. Now I'm talking longer than 3 weeks. At that point, you'd approach it the same way, mix that packet, 1 packet per RO. You would mix it with a gallon of water at this point, pour it into your housing, let it sit for a while. And when you're ready to use your unit again, remember, you want to flush that out. So kind of like what we did with saturation, run water through it again, allow the water to travel out, avoid the DI, and let that run for 10 minutes. At least you'll know that any of that remaining preservative is flushed out of your system. And the neat part is you can also utilize your flush valve on the unit, have it nice and open, and run water through so everything's getting out, even beyond the brine seal. Now, when it comes to storing your unit in the wintertime, I highly advise that you do not store it inside a cold environment. Now, I mean a non-temperature controlled garage. Your best preventative measure is the RO Guardian with RV antifreeze. But if you can avoid it, if you have a temperature controlled garage, that's perfect for storing this unit. So again, the better you take care of your unit, the better the unit will take care of you. So that's why you keep up with your maintenance, you store it properly, you run water through it, and you keep up with your filters. It'll treat you well. So either way, I'm Brandon from Pure Water Power. This is the PWP Dual RO DI system. Thanks for watching.